Resumption of Play. It's a 31-page poem, but I'm only going to read about 6 pieces from it. And it's about the Cooper Island Residential School. I was digging clams and oysters at low tide when they came gathering, uniformed, spotless. I didn't hear the vehicle arrive, but the crunch of boots on shells could be distinguished over the sea wash and clunk of metal clams hitting the pail. They dragged me, kicking one on each arm, the galvanized vessel left at water's edge. Grandfather had explained in detail how clams propel themselves deeper in sand and threatened. And so I offered thanks and stood a foot from the hole I'd started to dig. Against my protest and without warning or ceremony, father absent on the hunt, the 2 elders stricken, mother wailing and beside herself, they dropped me like an extricated clam into the metal bed of the pickup. No time to decompress or see the sights, straight to the harbor where a small boat waited, engine running. I bit the hand that tried to lift me from the box. Jesus H. Christ, teach this little piece of shit a lesson for me. Dragged down the ramp by my hair, kicking. I like his spirit, said the man at the helm, exhaling. We'll scrub the dirt off first, make sure the little bugger's not white underneath. I knew a couple of English curses, but the crewman spoke my language, the last time I'd hear it uttered freely without fear of consequence. He untied the lines and left the bow and let the bow swing out. Don't mind those guys, he whispered with a wink. They're under government orders. A light chop struck the bow. Relax, kid. This trip's a breeze to what awaits you over there. It's not what I intended, this litany of abuse. The realization came during a composition class. I'd spent the hour teaching kids the correct use of pronouns. Don't say her and me are going, but she and I. When I told them her and me are used as objects of verbs and prepositions, as in, they killed her, or sock it to me, all eyes glazed over, and one of them whispered a word I'd never heard before, Korinthenscheißen. Explain for the edification of the class, I demanded. Please, sir. Gertrude, blonde hair, Marlene Dietrich pose. It's German, sir. I'll write it down and leave it on your desk. Buzzer, ebbing tide of laughter, tightly folded scrap of paper. The translation, too tight assed to shit a current. Bingo. It wasn't always so. My sphincter stretched and penetrated. Schoolyard fun and games suspended, waiting for the Holy Father to shout a number from his open window. God has much for you to learn, he said, applying the Vaseline. No mention what the lesson was, though I surmised it had to do with power, authority. As he drove his point home, I could hear the resumption of play, a low murmur rising slowly like an organ bass outside. He insisted I recite the Lord's Prayer as he went about his business. My turns were infrequent, as he had other favorites. Time for the shame to burn off and bury myself in the books of Greek mythology he loaned me from his shelf. And so my education was advanced. A clam, the textbook explains, has a mouth, kidney, anus, but no heart. No wonder I felt such affinity for this bivalve mollusk that uses abductor muscles to yank its half-shells tight at the slightest threat. Like them, I clam up in social situations, keep my mouth shut, even as the puns accumulate, emotions run rampant. I prefer the privacy of high tide, avoid the phallic geoduck clam so rich in amino acids and testosterone, producing zinc. The horny marine biologist next door scares the living daylight out of me. A sick heart's the obvious exception, as it can endure a decade or more in lockup, another running full speed and still supply the vital organs, blood. What to do with anger and with shame? I was blinder than Homer, with stories no one wanted to hear, a ragged script wrestling its way to clarity. Blindness has its virtues, I suppose. It forces you to listen, to feel the air electric, the body's light that makes the hair rise and move like eelgrass in a tidal pool. Eyes widened at the pub to hear me speak of moral turpitude, sexual abuse, murder in God's name, and the church's failed instruments of the divine. Enough sermons, my buddies jeered. More beer, less bullshit. I drunkenly complied. Sound advice from hell's beleaguered saints, disciples all, whose uncloistered virtues surpass, so liberally scattered, their teachers' morbid litanies. Sadder, Budweiser. Chances of survival were 50-50 in the residential school. Unmarked graves contained the bones of infants aborted by the nuns, and children dead from beatings or disease. Immune systems compromised by hunger, loneliness. A decade spent viewing the world through the haze of drugs and alcohol, my children neglected, my wife driven to distraction. When AA meetings failed, I yielded to the sweat lodge, feeling the anger seep out through my pores, the stone begin to lift from my chest. Good news for Sisyphus. A year to dry out with the help of friends, song, drumming, dance, all of us scarred, bearing the marks of war. Nursed, embraced, encouraged to go back, take the children with me. I didn't know if I could do it, or if I wanted to. I returned home a stranger. The paved road held no magic. The trees no longer spoke to me. Father lost at sea. Mother, overcome by grief and joy, did not know how to say it in my new language. Grandfather smiled and placed a metal bucket by my chair. When I did not respond, he picked it up and dragged his crippled body to the shore to dig for clams. The tide was out. The sea, a looking glass, reflected our mutual despair. I walked to water's edge, touched his shoulder, and gently eased the shovel from his hands. As I applied my weight to the blade and felt it cut deep, the tidal funk awoke some feelings long submerged, and I found myself weeping and laughing at the same time. A creature, naked, shucked, fit for neither sea nor land.